How's it going? My name's Nico. I go by COINTrick and cointricktwitch online. If you want to see more videos like this one, please remember to like and subscribe. Hit that bell so you get notified every time I upload another one of these videos. So, based on the procedure that we have, we're using a recipe, ultimately, we're using a recipe for an oak-aged IPA. And there's a lot of reasons for that. It's because we want to be able to test some of the other things that go into making your beer and seeing if we can replace some of those ingredients also to get you some more nutritional value out of those things. So using celery instead of hops, using wormwood, using different kinds of aging agents, I guess, instead of your traditional like oak chips and things like that. But all of that is way, way down the line. Today, I am going to show you guys how to do grain extraction. We're going to be using a process called single-step infusion mash. We're going with a ratio of 1.3 quarts of water that we need to heat up. That's going to be our strike water per pound of grain. Take your sterilized container, sanitized container. Make sure your scale is zeroed out. So many pounds of this we have left. Ooh, maybe we didn't start with 4 pounds. All right, so we have 1.226 pounds of Farro. 1.226 times 1.3 to tell us the quarts of water that we're gonna need. We're gonna need about 1.5 quarts, but it's 1.5938 specifically. If we wanted to get as close to that as possible, basically what we would do is I can calculate the mass of what that should be, and then I could add that mass to the fermenter that we're actually going to use as our brew kettle. Same basic process. Make sure your scale is turned on, change your units over to grams. Now, let's do that math really quick. 1.5938, that's the quarts of water that we're going to need. Now, the density of water is a constant, doesn't really change. So I decided I'm not going to bore you guys with the math. After lots and lots of big numbers, basically, it means we're going to need 1,503.77244 grams of water. That's just regular grams, but we're going to measure it in kilograms to make this a little bit easier. I'm going to make it just a little bit less precise. If you're following the water sommelier on TikTok or YouTube, or you've seen him on TV, you're probably wondering where I'm getting the water that I'm getting for everything here. And I'm using tap water, which in this instance is a little bit more okay because we don't use city water here. We actually have a well. So our water here is pretty consistent, doesn't really change very much. And I'm gonna be getting it all out of the same faucet just to keep everything as consistent and accurate as possible. So we need about 1.5 kilograms of water. So here we go. We have 1.504 kilograms of water, which should be the ideal mass of water that we need to boil to get this experiment to work, or to get the extraction to actually work. I have my induction burner back here, and we're gonna use that in a little bit. This is actually stainless steel, so it will work. We've actually used this to brew beer in the past. What we're aiming for the strike water, which is what this is 158 degrees Fahrenheit. That's what I am aiming for, but nothing higher than 163. Because after that, like, we may accidentally end up like burning or caramelizing some of the stuff that we're working with here, and I don't want that to happen. Ultimately, the mash temperature that we want is 148 to 158. But the strike water will cool down as we pour it into the mash tun and as we use it to sparge and stuff like that over time too. So you want it to be a little bit hotter than what your target temperature is. 158 is a good place just to be. Keep it there. Don't let it go very much higher than 158. Absolutely don't let it go over 168, I think, or 165. That's when you kill and denature the enzymes that you're working with. All right, so here now we have our mash or lauter tun. Our strike water is heated up. The induction burner is set to 160. I'm reading 153 degrees, which is okay. I'd like for it to be a little bit hotter. All right, so what's gonna happen is we're gonna add the strike water here into the mash tun, or lauter tun, whatever you wanna call it. There's a false bottom inside of there that you guys saw us put together before. Basically what that means is that there's like a dome mesh that will filter everything before it comes through here. And then as we add the strike water, we will add the milled Farro, And then once everything is in here, we let that sit at a consistent temperature for 1 hour. To help that happen, I'm going to be using a sous vide to monitor the temperature, make sure that everything is moving, and also make sure that everything stays at a consistent temperature. If you don't know what a sous vide is, sometimes this specific device is referred to as an immersion circulator. What it does, you stick it in there, you supply it with power, and it heats up whatever it is that you put it in. Typically, it's a liquid, water, oil, or something. You stick it in there. It heats up the water in this instance, and it also helps to move it and circulate it to make sure that all of the water is the same temperature. That's going to be very important here, especially because the actual depth of the liquid that we're going to be working with is going to be incredibly shallow. So making sure that it's all the same temperature throughout that 1 hour is going to be incredibly important. And we're going to set it, I think, between 148 and 158 is probably the safest bet. So that's going to be 153. Add your liquid. Your immersion blender is going to be very, very angry at you at first. Now, I'll unplug that just for safety. Now, normally, I have a temperature gauge here as well, so kind of a double redundancy. Normally, you would want to add your strike water and your grains together slowly. In this instance, because we're not actually making a full, 10 gallons, we're actually doing less than 1/10 of what this container is capable of doing. I'm just pouring the entire thing in there, especially because I need a certain depth of water for the immersion circulator to work.
Many minutes later.
So the immersion circulator is working like a charm. We've been running this for about 30 minutes. It's holding that consistent temperature. Actually, the reaction happening inside of the water is exothermic, so it seems to be adding heat. So even though I set the immersion blender to, I think, 153, I've checked up on it a few times and it's been 155, 56, and 58. So now I've lowered the immersion blender to the lowest temperature threshold that, is acceptable for this, so it's 148. Later on, that could be a variable that contributes to some of the variance in this particular brew, but hopefully that's something that we can eliminate later on. What I'm going to do now that this has kind of settled in and extracted for about half of the time, the next thing that we're going to have to do is lauter this, which basically just means washing it back over, letting it run through that false bottom and filter itself until it's more or less clear or less cloudy. And then after that, we have to sparge, which is basically adding water on top and then draining out through this pipe right here into what would be your boil kettle or your final brew vessel. In this instance, we're going to be pulling it into one of these buckets so that we can use it later. But what we have to do now is heat up the sparge water or the hot liquor. In this instance, anything referred to as liquor just means that it is water specifically meant to make beer or water that will eventually become beer. That's the best way to understand it. That's why this guy is often referred to as either the mash tun, which is technically how it's working now, or the lauter tun, which is when you begin lautering and separating everything out and getting more of a clear, less hazy, less foggy, cloudy brew. So I'm going to heat up that water, then we're going to lauter this thing, we're going to clear it up a little bit, and then we'll begin the sparge later on. But for now, let's skip the next 30 minutes.
A few minutes later.
All right, so our initial 1 hour extraction with the milled grains is done. All of that stuff is still in here, but I have Justin joining me here. Justin used to work with me over at Dilworth Tasting Room, and we shared a love for many things, not least of which film, but also mixology and home brewing and just a bunch of different kinds of things. So yeah, we're gonna have Justin with us today as well.
What's up?
Sporting his Nick Offerman apron as well. So we have our sparge or our liquor, which here, and like I mentioned before, liquor just refers to any water that eventually will become beer or be involved in making beer eventually. We have it sitting at around about 175 degrees Fahrenheit. It's going a little bit below, a little bit above, but that's fine. The main thing is that this is above 170 degrees. So normally you would transfer that to your liquor tank, which would sit above your mash tun, lauter tun, and then you would open up a valve. It would pour in here for a consistent amount, and then you would drain from here over time into whatever your brew vessel is, whether it's your fermenter or your boil kettle or something like that. And if you wanted to, you could begin making beer with that pretty much immediately. But what we're going to do is we're going to kind of make an extract. We're going to pull this into a sanitized bucket that we have, And then we'll store that until we're ready to actually try and make a 1 gallon batch with that later on, because currently we are brewing all of the farro that we have, which is well more than you need to make a single gallon of beer. There is one step that we have had to skip, and that is the mash out, or basically where you raise the temperature inside of your mash tun to kill the enzymes that you have active so that you don't have anything producing more yeast or producing more alcohol, CO2, or anything like that as you begin to sparge. And I'll explain what sparging is here in a second, but we're skipping that because we're not actually working with that much volume. So heating this up is kind of like heating up oatmeal. It will burn very easily. So instead, we're going to sparge it, and we're going to allow the sparge to sort of disinfect and kill and denature some of the enzymes that we have in here now. Another step that we have to kind of overlook here because of how small the volume is that we have, normally you would do something called a Vorlauf, or Vorlauf depending on where you are, VORLAUF. And basically what that means is that you have a couple of containers, you have a couple of containers, and you pull into one container, pour in there as you pull into your second container, and you alternate, and you keep doing that until the runoff out of your mash tun or lauter tun is clear, or at least see-through. It's no longer opaque or cloudy. We will be skipping directly to the sparge, and what the sparge is normally if you have a traditional 3-tiered setup, your sparge or your hot liquor tank would be set up here. You would open up a valve, it would pour evenly over the top of your mash tun, and then you would pull your mash tun into your final brew vessel. But since we're not brewing that much, our sparge water is just a little pan that we've heated up to about 175 degrees, and we're just going to be adding that in here. Now there's an ideal rate that you want this process to happen, and basically you want to be pulling about 1 quart per minute through here. That's going to be a little bit weird for us because currently there's only about 1.5 quarts of water in this. So it's going to go by very fast, or we will have to intentionally slow it down. But I want to do this as close to the way that we will do all of the rest of the grain. So we'll see how it turns out. All right, so here we have a brew kettle. It is a very deep brew kettle. This is the size of the entire thing. So we're actually going to be pulling directly into here first. Then I'll pull it into a bucket through a super bag to get rid of any of those really fine grains and solids that we don't want in the final solution. So for now, this is almost a little bit too high up. I'm wondering if maybe I should just pull it directly into the bucket, which is a little bit lower, because I don't want this to raise up before it goes down. So it'll create a little pocket right there. Change of plans. We will pull directly into the bucket. So we only have about 1.5 quarts in here. We gave ourselves a minute, so do me a small favor. Can you set a timer for 1.5 minutes?
1.5 minutes.
If the ideal rate of transference is 1 quart per minute, and we have 1.5 quarts currently, it should take at least 1.5 minutes. What I have behind me is probably another quart. Just eyeballing it, not being scientific. So maximum 2.5 minutes. But let's start with that first 1.5 minutes.
All right. Let me know when.
All right. Oh God, I can't open the thing. Maybe it's been open this whole time, actually.
Wanna start?
Yes. It's great because the mic is literally right next to the mash tun. So it's getting all that good ASMR for you guys. Every time. This way. Oh no, there's actually literally not enough liquid to rise over this level. Which means I don't want to be that guy, but we're gonna have to caveman this.
Do you caveman things often?
Very often.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm mostly cavemaning everything that I do. All right. Let's... Huh. Hold that up. And then... Whoop. Almost. All right, I feel like we're gonna have to like triangulate this thing. I'll hold this side, you hold that corner,
Okay.
and here's what we'll do. We'll, yeah. Oh, wait, there we go. Did I almost drop the whole mash tun? I'll never tell. That's the false bottom. It'll be fine. Oh god. Is your hand okay?
I don't need it.
I got another one. The gods have blessed me with a spare. So here's the nice thing about using a super bag. When you have all your grains in there, you can squeeze them. Now, quick disclaimer: if you're making beer at home and you're using this as just a tutorial to do any kind of like all grain brewing, some people will tell you not to squeeze these because that's when you pull out all of the astringent flavors and things like that. And scientifically, the reason you don't want to squeeze this is because it's a human intervention and it's kind of hard to keep that stuff consistent. So I'm just going to do it to where I am comfortable. If the beer is a little bit bitter, that's okay. If you wanted to make this as consistent as possible, you would put a grate over the top. You would set this on top of the grate like that. And then you would let it naturally drip over time to get, the best, most even extraction and drip out of everything. Quick note, if you're doing a traditional sparge with your 3-tier gravity setup and you're working with more than, like a gallon of water or a gallon of brew, it's really important actually that you make sure that the sparge disseminates evenly over the surface of your mash tun or your lauter tun. The reason you want that is to prevent tunneling or channeling, because if you have it pouring directly, down the side or in the middle, it'll create a funnel as the water pressure pushes everything over, and the water, basically your clean water, your sparge water, will go directly through everything without actually extracting more. And that's the whole reason you do a sparge, is to get a little bit more of those carbohydrates actually through your whole system so that you have a little bit more to ferment and you have a little bit more body and a little bit more flavor in your final brew. So we skipped that only because we're making so little with this first batch. This is a test to make sure that the initial concept works. A few things to keep track of while you're sparging if you're doing a traditional sparge, right? 3 big things. 1, stop sparging when you have enough wort to actually finish your brew. So what that means is that if you're doing the one quart per minute and you're doing 10 gallons, you probably want to be doing your sparge for only 40 minutes, 45 minutes, just to be safe. And then after that, you also want to make sure that your grain bed doesn't dry. What that means is that you don't want to pull so much liquid off of it that your grains dry up, dehydrate, mold, or anything like that. And then third, make sure that your sparge doesn't get clogged. Now we're going to test the specific gravity of the runoff that we have here. And we're actually aiming between 1.008 and 1.012. If we're using Belgian units, then that's actually just going to be an 08 or a 12 points. So we need to fill this up with our liquid enough to allow this to float. And this is actually technically our hydrometer. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a reading here of how high the liquid level goes, the surface of the liquid. And then when we're done making the beer, we'll take another reading. And based on the original gravity and the final gravity, we'll be able to calculate the actual alcohol content as well. So like I said before, you can see the numbers, well, we can see the numbers here, 1.0, we're looking for something between 1.008 and 1.012. So we actually want this to be pretty much near the top of where it can read. Look at how milky that is.
Ooh.
So big difference. You guys will notice, as I just said, how milky that solution looks. if you did your proper mash out and your sparge and your Vorloff and all of that, this would actually be much clearer and easier to see through. I don't think this actually technically needs to be full, because it only needs to be able to allow this to float. Alright, okay. Someone at home, I'm sure, is going to be like, that's not how you do that. Oh, here we go. Alright, so it's lifted. Now I need to find the right measurement on here. Oh boy, okay. So it's actually at 1.02, which is not in that range that we were initially looking for. Now here's the thing. I don't know if adding water will make that number go up or down, but I've got to imagine it's going to make it go down, so I think that's what we need to do. Science is a pain in the ass. This is how you stir cocktails. When are they going to let you behind the bar, by the way?
I don't know if Alejandro did ask me.
Do you not want that? Or?
I don't know if that's that plays to my strengths or not. I have been asked if I wanted to train though. They get killed pretty much nightly. It seems like.
I think it's still at 1.02. So I think I'm just gonna have to allow that to be our original gravity reading for now. I'll do some research later on and see if maybe doing the Vorloff and the mash out and all of that stuff and clarifying everything would have lowered that number, heightened that number. I'll do that stuff later, but this was really just a test to make sure that the process would work and that we would have something that would be fermentable. So we have this now. Our Farro wort. So I'm excited to turn this into a beer, but we're not going to see that for a while. Next, we're going to do the same process with oats, amaranth, quinoa, bulgur, and millet. And, God willing, we will also do the same thing with einkorn, which is actually another kind of farro. Technically, this is farro emmer. If you guys want to look that up, it's basically there are three main kinds of farro. This is the most common kind. Einkorn would be the most micronutrient dense version of farro that exists, I believe. So that is in the running to be added to the study as well. So we have this. This will be turned into a beer later on. Thank you all for tuning in, sticking around, showing up. Thanks for all of your help and support. Hopefully I have been helpful and supportive as well. Hopefully we have been helpful and supportive as well, because that's why we do everything that we do here. Remember to like, subscribe, and comment, and tell me what you want me to make beer out of next. And I'll see you guys in the next video.